Would you be surprised to hear that a large number of prisons in the world today, American and foreign, are privately owned? No? Well, how do you feel about the CEOs of these privately owned prisons, profiting millions of dollars each year from prison labor, prison stocks, and federal immigration? Can you imagine that some states have contracts with private prisons which guarantees an inmate population minimum of 90%, or the state is responsible for the cost of the empty beds? The prison systems of America, rehabilitating inmates or debilitating society. These topics and more will be discussed on this edition of Exposure.
We know that the drugs have two effects that cause dependency or the desire.
There is no logical explanation other than
right and wrong is a very different standard than legal and illegal.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society.
Hi, I am Corey Benson, and welcome to Exposure. Joining us today, we will have Gary Polk, cultural advocate and upstanding pillar of the Tacoma community, Joy Gilliffin, president of the Restorative Community Coalition in Whatcom County, Washington, and Irene Morgan, founder, secretary, and treasurer of the Restorative Community Coalition. We have a very controversial topic up for discussion today, and that is prisons for profit. I'd like to introduce Irene to the show. Nice to meet you.
Glad to meet you, Corey. Thanks for letting me be here.
The prison systems today are full of corruption. Do you have any, because I know you deal with the reentry program, and do you have any stories or anything that you could elaborate on someone that's possibly gone through the system and some experiences that they've had?
Oh, many. I've been doing this for 10 years, so I've poked my nose around in nonprofits for 30 years, and what I've realized is nothing's better. There's lots of good programs out there, but they're mainly token programs. They need to be expanded so people can actually have services when they come out, so they can get the housing and everything that they need.
Right.
What I see, the pitfalls are many, and housing is the biggest piece. Well, probably, or ID. Our people here in Washington State are released with an offender badge, the same badge they wear inside the prison.
Right.
And there's a process by which they can get an ID if all the things are in place for
Right.
that. So ID is paramount. How can you get housing? How can you get a job? How can
You can't even do anything without
You can't
ID.
do anything. You can't get a bank account. So then housing, and there's a big push and has been in place for a long time, housing first. So they say that we like to get people in housing, but most people can't get housing when they get out. The state does not provide funds for people to be housed.
Right.
Mostly. There are a couple of programs. And so housing is the most important thing, to get a good night's sleep, to be able to take a bath and wash your clothes, to be able to go to work and get...
To feel like a person.
Exactly, to be a person. I mean, can you imagine being homeless and trying to get ready to go to work?
Right.
After not having a good night's sleep?
True.
Being cold, being not presentable. Employment is another thing. If you have a felony, it's virtually impossible to get a job. And I just talked to one of my friends the other day. He was planning to go out of state to be able to work, and at the very last minute, he had the job. They told him to go across, I don't know, 2 or 3 states, and right at the very last minute, they said, "Oh, your felony showed up. We're not interested in you." And yet, in the process, he was told it didn't matter if he had a felony.
Right.
And then when it showed up, they changed their mind, and that happens over and over and over and over. And then transportation is another thing. If you don't have a car, and you probably won't if you just got out, how do you get the bus passes you need, and how do you get across town? And where we're from in Bellingham, DSHS is clear on the other side of town from DOC,
Right.
from Department of Corrections. And so I took one person back and forth 3 times in one day, and I had to leave them at the Department of Corrections because I had to go do my own errands,
Right.
and I had already spent 3 hours with them.
Yeah,
And that was by car. That
and-
wasn't by bus.
And I don't know about Bellingham or where you're from, but here they're taking more and more bus routes away, so it's
Yep.
making it more difficult
Yep.
for people to get around.
Yep.
And then they stop running after a certain time,
Exactly.
so if you get off work late, how do you get home?
That's right, exactly. And we have refineries and things where the bus never runs.
Right.
So it's just all sorts of things that that don't. There's just not the cohesiveness that there needs to be. And so when all of these barriers show up for people, there's this young man that I just talked to, who was going to go out of state to get training to be able to work, he says, I refuse to go back to my old habits.
Right.
He says, I'm not going to be one of those statistics. So, but that's not the norm. Usually people go back to their old habits. They want to numb out, so they go back to their drug addictions or
Right.
whatever. And so many people say, well, they just want to be druggies. No, they don't. When they have an opportunity to get off, to have the help that they need, to have the services they need in order to be successful, most of them are successful, at least for a short period of time. And when you've been on the streets for such a long time or been inside prison, the trauma is huge. And I don't know anyone that's ever gone to prison that hasn't been traumatized before they went.
Right.
And being in prison does not help. It's exacerbated.
And then when they get out, they got all these barriers
Yep.
and
Yep, so
doors
it's-
keep closing, so it makes them eventually want to give up versus trying.
Exactly. And then the longer you're inside, the more institutionalized you become, so that it's almost impossible for you to be successful on the outside. And I know people who actually commit suicide because they can't make it on the outside, and
Wow, that
or
is very
commit a crime so that they can either go back to jail or go back to prison. It's really sad. And
I've heard it's institutionalized.
Yeah.
They're more comfortable in jail and out.
exactly.
But I understand you have a story you wanted to share with us.
I
You can
do. I
elaborate
just
on
got
that.
this on an email from a friend of mine. I wanted to let you know that I picked up a 24-year-old short Native American girl hitchhiking on a major highway at 11 o'clock this evening. She had been processed for release from jail at noon on Friday and was not released until 10 p.m., even though she asked to be released in time to catch the bus to an outlying area. She was released at 10 a.m. with no socks and no shoes except for the plastic flip-flops. She did not have her purse. The phone was not given her. She was not given a chance to make a phone call. So she walked barefoot on this highway where I picked her up. I dropped her at a store about 10 miles out of town where her family was going to pick her up. It was sleeting rain and freezing cold, and who is responsible for overseeing how people are released? This is what my friend is asking me. When she was arrested, after being in a car accident, she was not able to get her shoes or her purse, and her car was impounded. Her purse was stolen, and someone is using her iPhone. Who is responsible for overseeing how individuals are treated when they are arrested? This is the kind of thing that happens. I've heard this story over and over and over. This is absolutely not acceptable to me.
Well, thank you for sharing the story. We'll be right back with some more experts on these topics and more in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
My name's Jason White. I was just in high school. I just got out of high school and I went straight here. This program offers me the opportunity to go straight from schooling into the workforce, because it just seems like Bates has a really good bridge to the workforce and they're able to get me there. It's almost like our teacher is our boss and he gives us a project that we need to do. He gives us parameters and deadlines that we need to make. I would say just being really hands-on, and the small class sizes really help because you get so much one-on-one time with the teachers, and you can go as far as you want to go, because if you want to push the envelope and go more than the curriculum, the teacher will take you there. The sky is the limit because the teachers are so awesome, really. They'll go with you.
Welcome back to Exposure. Joining us today are Joy, Irene, and Gary. Joy, tell me a little about your organization.
I'm president of the Restorative Community Coalition. It started out as the Whatcom County Reentry Coalition, founded by Irene Morgan, who's on the set with us. And she founded it in 2006. I came aboard as the president in 2010 as a businesswoman, realizing that this coalition was absolutely on the cutting edge of transformation because they were aware that the prison industrial complex was out of bounds. Irene was working on solutions, and I wanted to work with it. And our coalition today has transformed from not just working with helping people stop recidivating by helping them re-enter, but we realized that this is a nightmare of an industry, and your highest return on investment of time spent in helping people is to not put them in the jail industry in the first place. So because the jail industry is the marketing arm for the prison industrial complex. So we work on helping people who are coming out of the prison system re-enter society. We help educate the community about the extraordinary costs that are acquired by the middle class and all the family members and everyone else. And then we're working on advocacy to change the system and to do prevention and stop the expansion of the mass incarceration industry in the first place. That's what we do.
Yeah, you guys are doing a lot of great work over there.
Yeah, it's all her fault.
Yeah. And you can't make me stop.
The prison system has also been referred to as the revolving door. What problems do you see with the prison system of today?
Oh boy, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry that is basically hidden from the economy. I mean, hidden from the middle class.
Well, where's the money going? Where's all this money going?
Well, the money, it's really interesting because there's a recent report out. I brought some papers here just to make me look important, but really it's to help keep me on track with talking about putting this whole context into context, this whole story into context. The Institute for Advancing Justice Research and Innovation just came out with a report called The Economic Burden of Incarceration in the United States. This is done from the Washington University in St. Louis, and what they reported was—
In October.
Yeah, this is October of 2016. They just came out and said that when the bureaucrats or the government talks about the cost of incarceration in America, they say it's an $80 billion industry. This report, just looking at 5 of the social costs that the taxpayers predominantly pay outside of the taxing structure and outside of the bureaucracy, the actual industry is a $1 trillion industry.
Wow,
that's a $920 billion shortfall.
Yes.
In perception for the taxpayers who are paying for public safety, supposedly. But what you find out when you start looking at the real issues, the amount of money that is consumed by privateering, which is what I did this chart about, and I know you can't see it on anything here.
Just hold it up for a little longer.
Okay, hold it up. So on this particular industry, what you'll find out is that what taxpayers think they're paying for with public safety is down here. But what happens is that as you start climbing up this chart, you realize that once you're arrested, you become a commodity. And people don't understand this. It took me 7 years to actually diagram it, to understand how this really happens. But as soon as you're arrested, you become a commodity. Your car gets towed, and if you pay a tow fee, your tow fee for like a drunk driving tow is like twice as much as a tow fee if it's a AAA cost. I found that out in Whatcom County.
Wow.
You start incurring fees and penalties and costs of assessment before you're even found guilty. All of those companies are making their money and they're charging you these fees, and they're not going it through the cost of bureaucracy. Those are direct to you. Once you get arrested and you go in, then you pay bail bonding companies, and those bail bonding companies are making money on it. Then you go from the bail bonding companies, you go up to your legal and professional fees. You get blood draws, you get urinalysis, you have to pay phone calls, and there's vendors. So this entire list on this side of the chart goes up because vendors run the cell phone companies out of there. The family members pay fees just to put money on the card so that people can get to talk. And then the cost of your conference call or your call can be 25 or 45 cents a minute.
Or your video.
Or your video call. Then you get court costs and court fees. These are all paid, not part of, people think that the taxpayers paying all this. The private citizen and their family members are paying it. Then you've got commissary fees.
Okay.
You've got, for example, if I as a family member want to buy a dinner for somebody inside the jail, it could cost me $50 to buy them a Thanksgiving feast. In that Thanksgiving feast, it's sold by Aramark Industries, by the way, and inside that Thanksgiving feast, what they get is 7 ounces of turkey. They get 24 bags of Top Ramen noodles.
Now they're in jail, remember?
Remember, and this is one dinner. 24 bags of Top Ramen noodles. They get a bag of sticky buns. They get high spicy Dorito chips. They get red licorice. I mean, this is absolutely insanity. These are foods that have been proven outside to cause upset stomach, to cause anxiety, to cause trouble. So Aramark Industries is making money up here. When you start going up the chain, this one person that is down here, that is feeding this entire marketing funnel, up higher you start paying for, I've got to remember because I'm a little nervous here. You start paying for attorneys and defender fees. You start paying for all your incidentals. If you have medical costs that are incurred in there, you pay for those. Family members pay. Credit cards start getting marketed to your family members. As you go further up, the real estate investment trusts that are buying and owning the prisons are all making money that's outside of the bureaucracy. You start going into immigration and detention. You start going into jail consultants and jail contractors. All of this is money that isn't even talked about when we talk about the price of incarceration. So it's one guy against this entire economic engine that is running a prison. I call it profiteering on punishment.
Right.
And at the highest end, these people who run these companies that are the jail vendors or the service providers or the contractors,
Correct.
these guys are trading stock options and they're in stock market. You know, they own companies that are publicly traded and it's expensive. So
An example would be a company called GEO.
yes.
Yes.
They design,
Yep.
build, maintain, and do all the expansion work for prisons. So they have it all. There's nobody can come in and say they're doing this right or wrong. So if the idea is to maximize your profit in house prisons, these guys are building prisons that are designed to be inadequate.
And those are
Absolutely.
privately owned
Those are
prisons
privately
too.
owned. This
And they're
one,
tax exempt.
GEO is not privately owned. They actually are on the New York Stock Exchange.
Publicly
There are
traded.
a couple. Yeah, there are a couple that are
Like
private.
CCA and a few others.
Yep.
Yes.
Corizon is one as well.
Well, and on that note, one of the things that I read is that the GEO Group and CCA and some of these guys, because they're federal government contractors, they're actually exempt from paying taxes.
Wow.
So they're making their profit margins and they're making cash flow margins. See, what people don't understand is one person who goes in here, it costs $55,000 in the state of Washington to incarcerate an inmate in the state and keep them in. That's what it costs the taxpayers. But by the time I started figuring it, and I need an actuarial to actually figure it out, but our estimates is that it's gonna, one person who gets kept in there is worth about $500,000 in revenue generated cash flow to all these other prison industrial contractors. It's incredible. It's incredible. That's the big problem.
That and they're
And that's
making a lot of
hidden.
money off prison labor too.
Yes. I'll let somebody
Yeah.
else talk to that.
And then of course you have all the people that are in the court system, all your judges, your clerks, your prosecutors, your defenders, all of these folks. That's all of the taxpayers, out of taxpayers' pocket. And I have seen as many as 15 continuances in a year and 3 months, in 15 months. So almost a continuance a month. And it's a money churn. It's what I've realized is the prosecutor doesn't want to talk, so the defender has to continue to acquiesce. And so it's just, people get paid for virtually continuing and not
they
doing
sit
anything in the
inside
meantime.
with the plea bargains. I think you should speak
Yeah,
to that.
well, and I don't know if you all understand the plea bargain process, but when someone is arrested, there's always a probable cause, and they can stack. We call them stacking of charges, and so you're stopped for one thing, you're arrested on one thing, but by the time you get to your arraignment, there can be as many as 3 to 6 charges additional, and then when usually you don't have the money for bail, so you stay in jail. You're still legally innocent. And if you continue to say, no, I'm not going to plead guilty to these stacked charges, then you stay in jail. And we know people that have been in jail up to 6 and 8 months just because they don't have bail bond, the money to bail themselves out. And they won't plead guilty to something they're not guilty of. So they continue to go through this churn.
And then the public defenders, they're not really doing their jobs, so.
Well, they're sort of subject.
Well, either
they have to
caseloads.
cooperate with the prosecutor.
They're subject to the
Can we talk
prosecutor.
about bail bonds real quick? Because there's some really
bet.
important information to put out there about that.
Yeah, we'll get
Okay.
back to that
Can
in just a
can I
minute.
say something about the prosecutors?
Oh yeah, sure.
I've read several articles, and the first time I read it, I thought, really, that's interesting. But and I'm sorry I don't remember the publication. It was either Yes Magazine or New York Times, I think. And they said that they went through this. I mean, it was a huge article, and they said the prosecutor has more power than a mayor, than a governor, or a legislator. So the power of all of this rests in the laps of our prosecutors.
Okay,
And-
hold that thought just for a second. We're going to take a small commercial break, and we'll be right back to Exposure. Stay tuned.
My name's Steven Jackson. I'm a student at Bates Technical College for the Civil Engineering Technology program. The college I was at was doing the same thing, just the civil engineering, but I transferred to Bates just to get the technology side. They didn't offer a lot of the technology that we use here, like Revit, all the Autodesk, basically everything else that I was told to be used in the field they don't use at the other college. The teacher we had was a great resource. She's been pointing us in the right direction to where to apply, which places, and what to look for and stuff like that. I did apply for a couple jobs for what I'm doing now. I actually just got contacted back from one of them, which is nice. So just be hopefully working with them. If someone's interested in the program, go for it. I mean, there's not much I wouldn't say there's anything that would be holding you back or make you say no from doing it. So I mean, if you're interested, take a chance, you know?
Welcome back to Exposure. Irene, you were speaking about the prosecutorial discretion. Can you continue on that, please?
Thank you. It was really disturbing for me to get that information that the prosecutor is more powerful than virtually anyone else in our nation. And of course, there's prosecutors all over the nation, and some are really wonderful folks doing wonderful things. We've got a couple here in our state that are doing really good things. The prosecutorial discretion is something that I think most people don't understand, that it's up to the prosecutor as to what happens to anyone that comes through their court. And there are some jurisdictions where the prosecutor reviews everything, every case that comes through their court. And they determine as to where they go, what they do, and other places, the prosecutor and the defender will get together and decide. Other times, the assistants will do it. But it's just really interesting to me that, especially in little towns where there's not much industry or things like that, the traffic becomes the income. The traffic violations become the income for the small towns.
Yes.
And that's where you get people having their cars and their jewelry and cash, if they have it, going across state lines, taken away from them at the police discretion.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Those are seizures.
Seizures, yes, search and seizure, and highway robbery by our officials.
Yeah.
So, so that was very disturbing to me, to know that the 1 or 2 or 3 people could have control of someone's entire future, and that's
a lot of power to have.
That's a lot of power to have, and I think when the public becomes aware of that, then maybe they'll look a little closer at some of their public officials when they go to vote next time, and make sure of what what's going on in their own communities. And I just have to say that I'm really excited about all the people that are coming out to protest in the streets now, because this is what we've needed for a long, long time.
And we need more people
And
to vote.
yeah, and just speaking their heart and saying, no, that's not what I want. I want what's humane and right action for everyone.
Yes.
Well, people assume that justice is done.
Yeah.
We just assume. We are so trusting as a population. We just trust that
Yes.
if people swear an oath and they swear to uphold the law and do civil rights and do all these things, that they actually do it. And we don't understand that systems can become corrupted because the systems get institutionalized, which feeds right into that bail
Yeah,
conversation.
we're talking about bail.
Well, the interesting thing about bail is that there's a lot of interesting things about bail. First of all, it's a profit industry, and you've got a profit-driven entity that's really determining what your freedom will be. You can argue this in a number of ways, but if you have money and you wind up in the system, you have a better chance of getting out. An example would be if you have a bail set at, say, about $100,000, right? I go in, I pay my $100,000. At the end, I'm found innocent, I get my $100,000 back, right? Somebody else goes in. They don't have $100,000. They have to pay 10% to the bail bond, who puts that 100 up for them. They don't get that $10,000 back. That's gone. They'll never see that again. Now think about the people we're talking about. That. Right, the bail bonds that keeps that $10,000 and any other fees that you acquire along the way. So, in Canada, in England, it's actually illegal. You can't have bail bondsmen because they see them as a way of impeding justice.
Right.
In a lot of ways, they really shouldn't even exist.
Very interesting.
And there are many communities that no longer have it. The cash bail system is not even allowed in some communities. So it's not that we have to have them, it's because it's allowed.
Well, and we've had, if you tie those two issues together, we've had a situation that we've been talked to people about, an inmate who was arrested and was put in the system and was told that they could get into drug court, for example.
And wanted to go.
And wanted to go, and they qualified, and there was space in drug court, but the prosecutor wouldn't sign off on it because of prosecutorial discretion. This guy spent 8 months in there, and he had buddies that were in there until they paid their bail. And they'll say, no, that doesn't happen. But it did happen. And so until they actually were able to pay their bail, then the instant they paid their bail, suddenly the prosecutor signs off on the document. The guy went into drug court.
It didn't matter about the qualifications, it was about the money.
Yeah,
He'd
it
already
was totally
served 8 months, and then he had to do a 2-year drug court.
One interesting fact you have to read a number of documents to get this, is that in some ways there are more people in jail waiting for court than people that are in jail that have been sentenced. And we're talking months. We're talking months and months of people being in jail. They haven't even seen a day in court. And then there's the presumption of innocence.
80% of people in jail are legally innocent. They have not had their day in court.
And many of those people in there are nonviolent, and the statistics are, Vera Institute came out with some statistics. It's extraordinary. The amount of nonviolent people who are not guilty, who are kept in jail. When you think about that 8 months inside the jail, how much did the taxpayers pay to keep that person in jail because the prosecutor chose to keep him in there?
Right.
What's up with that?
It's a lot going on in our systems, obviously. I want to bring up a Judge Mark Ciaravella. I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing his last name wrong, but he had a Kids for Cash scheme going there. You were aware about that? I'm sure you guys all know about that.
I remember that guy.
Yep.
For those that don't know, that's pretty. He was a judge convicted. He got 28 years for pretty much sending juveniles to jail for cash.
In his own jail.
Yes, and what was it? 4,000 to 6,000 got overturned after he went to jail. So he was making millions of dollars just sending people to jail. And if you're the head of our judicial system, where does that leave us?
Well, one of the big problems you have is that there is a presumption that the person who is elected, there's the presumption. I ran for office a little while ago, and what I learned in the process was once you're an official, it's like everyone believes that what you're doing is telling the truth. That isn't necessarily true.
Right.
And when you have large, like $920 billion sitting inside our jail industry that is undeclared to the taxpayers,
right.
Even the millionaires and billionaires that are in the streets that oftentimes are blamed for this stuff, if they're not invested in the real estate investment trusts, if they're not invested in this industry, they don't even know what's happening. You can talk to businessmen in this town and they have no idea, or in any town, they have no idea what's actually going on. And so this guy is doing his thing, just like any community. When you have institutions and you have people working together, they don't want to rat on their buddy.
Right.
You know, it's common decency. We don't want to talk about that which is uncomfortable.
Right.
And this is a tough topic to talk about anyway. You've had that experience where people would take a step back from you.
Yeah.
Can I give you a quick point on the
Yeah.
businesses that were involved? I'm just going to list these businesses. There's the GEO Group, Corizon, CCA, and Global Tellink. Global Tellink is the company that handles virtually all of the communications, video and phone for them. But the interesting thing about each of them is they were formed in either 1980, 1983, or 1984.
And
the
that's
reason
around-
why I'm pointing that out is because the push for the legislation for things like 3 strikes you're out, and one time you get this, and the discretion taken away from judges, those were all on the books. Those were going to come out. So these guys built these companies to do this before we had.
It was all contrived.
And that's
Set
also
of
right
marketing
around the time
articles.
that private prisons became about and were on the rise.
Yep. It's a plan.
Oh, is that
Shut
too?
it off?
Oh, that's fine.
We'll just wait.
Obviously,
it's
somebody
fine.
wants to
Yeah.
talk to you. You're a very important lady.
And the other piece,
She's calling a friend or something.
These are raindrops of happiness coming down on us. Go ahead.
can't remember what I was going to say. Something about the
People taking 2 steps back?
no. In our county jail, Legacy is the phone system.
Right.
And what I think most people don't understand, especially the public, is in order for a family member to talk to their loved one in jail, they have to go through a special process where they contact Legacy. Legacy charges you to put so much money on their book for your loved one, and you don't know how long your loved one's going to be in there. So you put, say, $20, but then you find out they're going to be in there a few months, so you put more money in there, and it costs you every time you add money to that account. And it's like $10. It's not a cheap amount. So this is, again, is just highway robbery. It's taking advantage of the poor, and that happens with commissary. It happens with several other things. I'm just not coming up with all of it. But
To tail into that,
Yeah.
if you have if you set up your membership, first you're charged to set the membership
Right.
up, so you're paid for that. You get in the system and you realize that it's not working for you, right? This is not working for me, so I want out. They charge you an exit fee. So in other words, if you want to
Wow.
if you want to get in, it costs you money and then you have money there. If you want to get out, it's going to cost you money. So they're checking you every step of the way.
Right.
And they also don't tell you when you ran, if you've still got money in there, when you start, when your person gets exited and gets released, you don't necessarily know if you've still got $30 or $50 or $100 in there or $10.
And you do that in aggregate on like what, 200
they just keep
2
it.
million
Yes.
2 million prisoners. That's
And then the other piece is Legacy doesn't give you have to call in to find out how to get your money back. And then I found out that you have to use the same phone that you set up the account in order to get your money back.
Wow,
So-
that's very interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, and one of the things that I want to spin off there, because I forgot about this, privatization of prisons. People think that that's just a federal issue. And in Washington State, people will tell you, we've had our officials tell us, oh, we don't have private prisons in Washington State. There's distinctions in what is defined as a private prison. Yes, we have a county jail, but inside of and they'll tell you, you don't have private jails, right? Okay, I just showed you that there's a $920 billion shortfall between what they report as cost of incarceration. I've shown, and we've talked about, all these companies that are making money over here. Well, is this a private prison industry? Yeah, these are private prison contractors. Aramark, for example, is the local contractor. Aramark controls all the food vending that goes into the jail in our county. They also happen to be an international food vending system. They're also the ones that provide for a lot of the prisons, and they provide for the colleges, and they provide for the sports stadiums. And so this is a major multinational corporation that is doing private prison contract service vending in our local jail system and making buco bucks on it.
And speaking on the private contracts, it's also with some states, with some of these private prisons, they have contracts on keeping the population at least 90% full, or else that state has to pay for the empty beds.
Exactly.
It's like a hotel system. I mean, that's what in the immigration detention centers,
Right.
and in some of
So we're
then
guaranteeing
yes.
prisoners.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
with
We're
that,
guaranteeing that there will be prisoners.
yes.
yeah, so with that,
It's
that's
guaranteeing their
forcing
income.
this pretty much the state or the local police to arrest more people because otherwise they're going to have to pay. So
I want to give you
people are getting arrested for smaller crimes or sent to jail for longer times for something that should have been a slap on the wrist or something, for instance.
We went from a 9-day average length of stay to a 28-day average length of stay in our county.
Let me give you a really quick stat on what kind of money we're talking about. Global Tellink, which is the company that we were just talking about, they were purchased in 2009 for $345 million. In 2011, they were sold for $1 billion.
Say those numbers again.
They were purchased in 2009. We're talking about a 2-year period. In 2009, they were purchased for $345 billion. $345 million, excuse me, $345 million, and they were sold 2 years later for $1 billion.
And who were the buyers? Do you happen to know?
The brother.
Veritas and Goldman Sachs did the original purchase in 2009, and then American Securities bought it 2 years later. So we're talking about over
we're having
$600
a very
million.
interesting discussion right now. We will be right back after a small commercial break, and stay tuned.
My name is Joe Letner. I'm a student at Bates Technical College in the digital media program. Before I came to Bates, I was doing a whole lot of nothing really. You know, I tried going back to school, but I always felt like, traditional school really wasn't for me. After just being out and just sort of hitting dead-end job after dead-end job, I finally got a kick in the pants. Was like, hey, I have a skill, I should hone it. And Bates was the place that made it real easy for me. The instructors are just really caring. They don't see you as just a number because the class sizes are small. So, they get to know your name in the first couple of days. And if somebody was interested in this program, I would tell them that they need to sign up right now because this class fills up fast. I had to fight to get in here. So just get out there and do it because nobody's gonna help you but you.
Welcome back to Exposure. We've talked a lot about the problems we have with the prison systems of today. Irene, what do you think are some of the solutions that can help maybe reverse some of the money that's being spent to a positive?
There's so many. It's when your child needs to be corrected, you correct them then. You don't wait for the next day or the next week to correct them. And it's my premise, and one of my new slogans is, when people know better, they do better. There's so many people that have been raised in the drug culture. It's been going on for decades now, so there's generations that have never had a male figure, especially the men, because they far and away outnumber the women in prison, although the women's prison number is growing. But if people don't know how to live, if they don't have life skills, they can't live the life that society expects them to live, to be wage earners, to go get a job, to be able to clean their home, care for their kids, and be good parents. So we have to have those kinds of programs for people, especially those coming out of prison. And the best leverage is before they ever go. So if someone is not living as they could be and find themselves in jail, then let's circumvent the jail and put them in a program where they can actually learn how to clean their home, for one thing. There's so many things we can do. And one of the things that when I first started, before I started the coalition 10 years ago, I did some research and found Delancey Street in San Francisco.
Okay.
And they help people coming out of prison, and most of them just don't know how to live life. They don't know how to be the citizen that the public expects them to be. So Delancey Street has housing, they have employment, they have education, and people actually work in the businesses that Delancey Street owns. And Google it, it's awesome. It's an awesome program. So when I discovered that, I thought, we can do that in Bellingham, where we are. So my vision for Whatcom County is the Restore Life Center. And on top of all of that Delancey Street does, I'm a counselor and a therapist, so of course I'm always looking for solutions and helping people in their plight. So along with the housing, education, and employment, then we'll have a recovery and wellness portion, which will include a farm. Join our farm girls. We know how to get dirty and muddy and walk barefoot on the planet. And I used to, I was 8 years old when I first started milking my first cow. So I know all about getting dirty and seeing the chicken lay an egg and wonder, wow, how'd that happen? And pulling a carrot out of the ground and eating it, wiping it on your jeans. And most people aren't in contact with the earth, with the planet.
Right.
And there's a pulse to the planet, so let's get back connected with that pulse. And I believe that is one of the most important things we can do for people in healing the whole process. And there are programs throughout our nation. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Everything that's successful is already there. We need to bring it together, have a holistic program for people, and there's kids. I mean, they've already shown that breakfast in schools works, because if the brain isn't fed, the child can't learn. So let's do that with absolutely every process and aspect of our society. We must. And I've also learned that, and maybe I already said this, when people know better, they do better.
Right.
And I don't know anyone as a child that said, Mom, I want to grow up and be homeless. I want to grow up and go to prison.
This is true.
That's not their goal.
It's circumstances. And it's lack of education. It's lack of knowing what to do, how to be appropriate, how to act.
Right.
I just started a book by a man who just got out of prison, and he was beaten every day. His father deserted the family, and they were all farmed out to other people, not even relatives, just people in the community. And they did the best they could, but they didn't give this young man the foundation he needed to be a good citizen. They did only what they knew, and they kept him from being homeless, but he certainly wasn't nurtured in a way that he could have been. So let's teach these folks. Let's help them be a better community member.
Right.
May I speak to that for
Yes,
a second?
sure.
There's a couple of key things that we've discovered. If it costs $55,000 a year in Washington State to incarcerate an inmate, and they stay in for 20 years, that's $1 million.
Right.
Buku bucks.
You know what it costs to put somebody to trade school?
Nowhere near $1 million.
Like 15,000, like 15,000 a year.
Yeah.
You can put them to a Harvard education for a heck of a lot less.
Right.
We in the coalition, when Irene first started working with this, we've done some case studies, and we've taken people out of the system for no money. We've taken people out of the system for $1,500 who had already cost the taxpayers $500,000. And if you multiply that times the multipliers that we're talking about, you know how much money was sitting over there that's being scarfed out of the system that we're not even aware of.
Yes.
What we want to do, her Restore Life Center is one of the visions for Whatcom County.
Right.
The other thing that we can do through the nonprofit is we can run a trauma interception center. So this is what happens. They've learned through the World Health Organization. They did the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. And what they discovered is that when you have X number of traumatic experiences in your first 5 years, your probability of going to prison is like off the charts. Your probability of getting involved in addiction and drugs and alcohol and sex addiction and all these other things goes off the charts. So if you can actually intercept the trauma,
Yep.
and imagine, we had a fellow in Whatcom County who fell asleep at the wheel with his 3-year-old son in the back. He got arrested for a DUI. He wasn't drunk. He actually had
Drugs or alcohol.
sleep apnea. And he fell asleep. His son is traumatized. He's traumatized. He gets arrested, put in the system. Eventually, he got found innocent. But you know what? That
was too
just
late.
created massive trauma
It was too late
on
by
him.
then.
That's right.
You can't take the trauma back.
And so what
He's
we want to
already
do.
traumatized to
Yeah.
kill 2 people.
Right.
Yeah, so what we want to do is we want to stop the trauma at the front. Well,
Right.
if you stop the trauma at the front, that means that there's a lot of money left over
Exactly.
that you're not putting into negative consequences. We have a punishment-based system.
Yeah.
As an economy, we can flip it over and do it the other way. So we've actually got free money then available to go into education. What's the biggest problem we got in the state of Washington is funding education. We can fund aromatherapy, healing arts. There's all kinds of neurosciences that are out there, cognitive behavior therapy. We've got this particular thing, the Washington State Institute for Public Policy. Read this. This will blow your mind. We can get a 25 to 75, and in some cases up to several $100 return on investment for every dollar put in. We can have a positive cash flow coming back into our society, which is massive amounts of money.
Right.
So we can build healing arts, we can build all those things, and it looks to me like you've got something you want to say.
Oh, no. I just
no?
wanted to point out of a couple of the agencies that are actually doing things differently. In LA County, it's called Breaking Barriers. And
Right.
Yes.
Yes, I heard
for
about that. Yes.
non-violent offenders that are on probation, they will pay for their rent.
Yep.
And then in San Francisco, there's it's called Transitions Clinic, and they're different. They're kind of doing the same approach, not exactly, but they're being more proactive, right? They're not waiting for it to become a huge problem. They're trying to get there beforehand. And if you do a search on Google, and maybe I don't know this because I'm not a prisoner, but when I did my research for assistance, there's tons of stuff that comes up. I don't know how valid that stuff is, but
Well, we just wrote this, Irene and I wrote this book. It's called Stop Punishing Taxpayers, Start Rebuilding Community. We wrote this on purpose because they're trying to build this huge jail in our community, and we want to circumvent that. We believe, based upon our research, that if 80% of the people going in are nonviolent and they're not really criminals, that's an 80% margin. What if we could cut the population down 50%? What would it take to do that? And how do we rebuild community? Because it's community, relationships, dealing with trauma, intervention. This entire book is full of solutions that have been done by other organizations. We've got highlights. This is accessible.
That is very interesting. And at this time, we have run out of time for our discussion today. It was very wonderful having you guys on the show. I appreciate you guys coming out. Thank you for your time. And for you guys watching, we will see you next time on Exposure. I would like to thank everyone for watching this episode of Exposure. Be on the lookout for more exciting shows on more controversial topics like this. I am Corey Benson, and have a blessed day.